Hello, my name is François Le Goff. I'm the Euclid product manager here at the European Chemicals Agency. And today I will present you a webinar on the major changes introduced by Euclid 6 version 8.01 that we released at the end of April this year. Let's start with a few words of introduction. And let's concentrate first on the release plan that you can see here on this slide, where we display the time during the year when we operate new versions or we release new versions of Euclid. So the last one was at the end of April, version 8, and this is a major update, including format changes. And there is another service release planned at the end of October, as you can see on this picture. And at the beginning of next year, in 2025, we'll have yet another format changes release with the Euclid 6 version 9. So usually we have two major releases per year, and you can see also that in the middle of the year and at the beginning of the year, we have some optional windows of publication for releasing optional service releases. As usual, you will find all the details about the release in the release notes that we publish on the Euclid website. And they are updated each time a Euclid release is shared with at least a group of users. So you have the full information available here in this document. Let me now give you an overview, a high-level view of the content of this release. As I said, it's a major Euclid release with format changes, and during this webinar, we will go in details into the format changes introduced by this new version. But this version of Euclid introduced also fixes and improvements, and I listed some of them here. For example, the display of the documents. In the user interface, they were not always in the same order. This has been fixed in this release. When you are preparing also classification labeling notifications to be submitted to ECHA, you can now retrieve the information we have in ECHA's repository to prepare your dossier. We also displayed additional text linked to pick list entries. This is sometimes useful to see the categories to which a pick list entry belongs. We have also updated the report templates and the validation assistant rules, mainly to adapt to the new format. And I would like to mention also a specific fix that we have done for a known issue that was published on the Euclid website. It has the number 116, and it was linked to data migrated as attachments instead of the relevant field. This is something that happened with the previous migration release in 2023. So now you will see that a fix is included in this version to restore the data from the attachment to the relevant fields inside Euclid. For any software updates, there is always some analysis to be done before deciding to upgrade. And this is particularly true for an update that brings format changes. So in general, we recommend the following steps before upgrading to check which version of Euclid is accepted by the recipients of your data, or which version of Euclid is installed in the people you are sharing information with in general. Then check the release notes and also refer to the existing known issues that we publish on the website. You can see the link here on this slide. And in general, verify the compatibility of the tools that you use in connection with Euclid. For example, if you are using Quasar, Text Analytics, or the data extractor, please have a look at the documentation for these tools to see whether they are already available in a compatible version with Euclid. And now it's a good time to see what is included in our agenda for today. So I did the introduction, and I will continue also a little bit with the overview of the main format changes, and my colleague Lea Coco will present the remaining part of the format changes. After that, we will have a section of the webinar dedicated to information relevant to specific user groups. And this will be presented by my colleagues Anna Dashinska and Dorota Buchar-Sosnowska. And at the end, my colleague Robin Allen will give some advice on upgrading Euclid and also will conclude this webinar. As I said, I will continue a bit this topic about the overview of main format changes. And I will start with some reminder on what is the Euclid format and how it is structured. you can see that the Euclid format can be divided in two. On the left side of this slide, you can see that some parts of the Euclid format are harmonized at OECD level, and these are documents or forms in the user interface that you see that can be used to prepare submissions for different Euclid users and different jurisdictions in the OECD. On top of this harmonized format, we have also some format extensions to fulfill specific requirements from different regulatory authorities. So you know that Euclid is customized to prepare submissions for EU legislations such as REACH, the Biocides regulation, or the plant protection product regulations. It's also able to be used to prepare submissions for Australia or New Zealand. And United Kingdom's competent authorities are also preparing their own extension in case it's needed for UK REACH in the future. So let's see now what are the requirements and format changes that were included in this new version of Euclid. We collect all year long requirements from different users, and we also check the regulations and the update of the test guidelines by the OECD. And this year you can see on the right side that more than half of the requirements were targeting the update of harmonized part of the format, so the OECD, domain, and core. And there is also a good proportion of changes that are done at the level of the EU plant protection products specific format extension. And we are also working quite intensively on the preparation for the Drinking Water Directive usage of Euclid. So apart from the standard maintenance of the format that is done following the feedback collected from Euclid users, we have also some other main drivers for this format update, and I listed some of these drivers here. First of all, the update of the EU Classification, Labeling and Packaging Regulation, the CLP regulation. We have also taken into account the implementation of the EU Drinking Water Directive, and we have improvements for data collections under other regulations such as REACH, BPR, and plant protection products. And we have also updated the templates based on the approved OECD harmonized templates proposed by the OECD Secretariat following the evolution of the OECD test guidelines. You can see on the right side the origin of these prioritized requirements, mainly from ECHA and from EFSA, but we have also requirements coming from other stakeholders. I wanted also to point out a link on the website. You can find on the Euclid website the complete format documentation package, which is always composed of the same elements. You can find, for example, all the XML schema definition files. You can see also user-readable Euclid documents representations. You have the list of all the Euclid fields in Excel format. And you can find also, for example, the migration rules that were implemented in Euclid to move from version 7 of the format to version 8. Now let's dive a bit more into some specific changes, first done to specific definition providers. I wanted to highlight two here, one for Australia, where we updated the relevant table of contents to refer to the new versions of the OECD harmonized templates on use and exposure information. And I will come back a bit later on this in a couple of slides. And for New Zealand, where there was an update of several phrase groups in several documents. Some specific changes to specific definition providers that we did also for EFSA and plant protection products. I can list, for example, some updates in the dossier header where the contributor role was updated. We have also created new documents to store information on impurities, or for example, on the definition of residues biomonitoring. We did updates on several documents as well. And another example of changes we performed in this update is the addition of a new section to store information about endocrine disrupting properties to report in vivo and in vitro in chemical endocrine disrupting test results. There were also some smaller changes, and we updated also the validation rules, and some adaptations to the filtering logic were made to support better the publication of data coming from these submissions. To finish on the specific definition providers change, I will also mention a couple of changes for the poison centers notifications, where we have added a new update justification, and we have also made possible the link of several mixtures for group submissions. For ECHA, I will also mention a new indicator that will be used in ECHA-Chem, our new dissemination system, where it will be possible to see whether a dossier was filtered according to the pre-REACH legislation, the so-called nonce filtering. We did also some changes to the biocides products regulation and the format used for the drinking water directive. But as I said, this will be covered by my colleagues later on in this webinar. My last slide is for the first changes that I would like to present on the OECD harmonized templates. This first change is the harmonization of the use and exposure templates. These templates were created already in 2016, and these are the OECD harmonized templates number 301 to 306. And they have not been used yet by ECHA because we were using really similar but not totally harmonized REACH templates. So in April 2024, with this release of Euclid, we have managed to finalize the harmonization, and we are now using only one set of templates to store this type of information. And this is why, for example, we updated the Australian table of contents to reflect this change, because now we use the same templates whether the data is submitted to ECHA or to Australia, for example. And this information will be stored only once in Euclid. The migration will take care of the transfer of the information. So if you had information in one or the other set of templates, this will be taken care during the upgrade to the latest version of Euclid. I will now hand over to my colleague Lea Coco, who will continue with the presentation on the OECD harmonized templates. Thank you very much, and see you.
Thank you, Francois, and hello. My name is Lea Coco from the Euclid team at ECHA, and I will continue with some of the main changes to the OECD harmonized templates. And something that affects all study summaries are the changes that have been made to improve the reporting of QSAR studies in Euclid, so the quantitative structure activity relationship studies. And all study summaries here in this context means not only the OECD harmonized study summaries, but also most of the definition provider specific study summaries, for example, under EU PPP or EU BPR. And what these changes entail are firstly the addition of altogether 18 new fields to report on the QSAR models, their validation and applicability. And I will provide an overview of these new fields shortly. However, please note that these new fields, they will only be visible to the user in Euclid if in the field type of information the option QSAR has been selected. So if the study has been specified as a QSAR study. Then secondly, changes have been made to the pick list values in the field rationale for reliability, including deficiencies regarding QSAR specific values. So a few new phrases have been added, some phrases have been changed, and a few phrases have also been made obsolete. Finally, a number of adjustments have been made to several text templates and to help texts with regard to QSAR-related input. And these changes, they are essentially the implementation of the QSAR assessment framework, which was adopted by the OECD in 2023, and which helps regulators assess QSAR studies and enhances confidence in accepting alternative animal-free methods for chemical hazard assessment. So More in detail, here you see an overview of the types of fields that have been added to the study summaries. And again, these fields are only visible to the user in Euclid if the type of information of the study has been specified as QSAR. So there are 3 fields under the materials and methods section to describe the model and software used. Then there are 50 new fields under the section results and discussion to structure information on the applicability domain, the reliability of the QSAR predictions, the analogs, so similar substances with experimental data, and on uncertainty. Then moving on to environmental fate templates. So the result reporting across selected environmental fate templates has been better aligned by making use of the result section's material mass balance and disappearance time of parent compound. And these result sections, they were already being used in the OECD harmonized templates 29. So biodegradation in water and sediment simulation tests, and in OHD 30, so biodegradation in soil. But now their use was also extended to the OHDs 25, hydrolysis, 26, phototransformation in water, and 27, phototransformation in soil. So where any similar fields already existed on these 3 templates, they were essentially replaced. And where none such fields existed, these were added, provided that the addition was considered relevant against the respective OECD test guidelines. Small aligning changes were also made to the 2 biodegradation OHDs, mainly in the form of minor data type changes. Then there were also changes to a number of OHDs as proposed by the OECD Secretariat to take into account the evolution of the OECD test guidelines. And so changes to cover new or updated test guidelines, they are now implemented as part of this major Euclid release to the following OHDs. So OHD 29, biodegradation in water and sediment, simulation tests. 48-2, endocrine disruptor testing in aquatic vertebrates, in vivo/embryo. 49, sediment toxicity. 65, eye irritation. 71, genetic toxicity in vivo. 105, nanomaterial specific surface area, and 107, nanomaterial surface chemistry. And there was also a slight name change to the OHD 105 to now also include skeletal density. Then moving on from study summaries to endpoint summaries. So firstly, there was a change to the endpoint summaries, biodegradation in soil and field studies in terms of how the pH-dependent DT50 values are reported. So while it was previously possible to provide up to 2 values in case of pH dependence, it is now possible to provide up to 3 values. So the more regular use case can now be reported regardless of the pH-dependent values. Similarly, the possibility to provide pH-dependent key values was also enabled for the endpoint summary adsorption-desorption for the KOC, so the organic carbon-water partition coefficient, and now also for the newly added slope of the Freundlich adsorption-desorption isotherms, so 1/n. It should be noted that in both cases, the pH-dependent values, they will only be displayed to the user in Euclid when yes has been selected in the field pH dependence. Then for field studies, there was also a correction to the type of document that can be referenced from the endpoint summary. And for the endpoint summary repeated dose toxicity, there was a change to the fields with the label experimental exposure time per week, hours per week, where indeed the unit hours per week was removed from the field label, and the unit days per week was introduced for the oral route, and the unit hours per week for the dermal and inhalation routes. Then finally, in the flexible record OHT 201, so intermediate effects, mechanistic information, there was a change to how attachments can be provided in both the materials and methods section and the results and discussion section. And this means, for example, including the opportunity to provide separately a sanitized document for publication. But that concludes my part, so thank you very much. And now over to my colleague Anna Dashinska on changes related to the EU CLP regulation.
Thank you, Lea. Hello, my name is Anna Dashinska. I work in ECHA's Data Availability Unit with implementation of the classification and labeling, information in ECHA's IT tools and data formats. In this part, I will provide some background information on the recent amendment to the European Classification and Labeling Regulation, explain how this change affects the Euclid users, and guide you through the new Euclid fields. The European Classification and Labeling Regulation implements the globally harmonized system of classification and labeling, GHS. Recently, the European Commission amended the CLP regulation with new hazard classes that are not covered by GHS. This change entered into force in April 2023, and it applies to substances and mixtures placed on the European market. From the April 24 Euclid release, information on the new hazard classes can now be entered into Euclid and submitted to ECHA in dossiers under the CLP, REACH and Biocidal products regulations. There are different transition periods concerning the new hazard classes that apply for substances and mixtures. During these periods, the new hazard classes can already be applied on a voluntary basis, including when submitting dossiers to ECHA. Currently, there are no changes to the completeness check of REACH registrations in relation to the new hazard classes, but the Euclid Validation Assistant will remind companies to start entering this data whenever available. To support the companies, we have updated manuals on dossier preparation with instructions how to provide information in the new Euclid fields. Now, let's take a look at the new fields. The new hazard classes are added in Euclid section 2.1 GHS under Health Hazards and Environmental Hazards. The fields contain standard pick list options that correspond to hazard categories and statement in the CLP regulations. The classes are flagged as IUCLD as they are not currently part of the globally harmonized system of classification and labeling of chemicals. On the right side, you see a table listing all new hazard classes under the European CLP regulation. Additionally, as of Euclid version 8, a new field, Reason for Classification, is available to report the reason for classification per each hazard class. In the field, there are several options to select, and it's possible to select more than one entry from the pick list. If a harmonized classification based on Annex 6 of the CLP regulation exists for the hazard class, you should always select EU harmonized classification as the reason for classification. In the field Acute Toxicity Estimates, you can also report acute toxicity estimates for all the relevant routes of exposure if you report an acute toxicity hazard classification under the CLP regulation. That ends my presentation. Thank you for watching. I now hand over to Dorota Burchardt-Sosnowska.
Thank you, Anna. Hello, my name is Dorota Burchardt-Sosnowska. I work in Data Management and Analysis Unit in the IUCLID team. I will present features related to the IUCLID for biocides implemented in the version 8.01 released in April, and I will also say a few words about reusing biocidal product authorization dataset to prepare an SPC with version 8.02 released in May. We are still improving IUCLID, and today I would like to show you what has changed since the SPC go live in February. First, in the product document, we have a new header, composition of the product. In the same document, for a component which is an active substance generated in situ, a user can provide either content or a content range. When one of the options is selected, the other one is not active anymore. Then, we added hazard pictograms to the document hazard and precautionary statements. In both documents containing directions for use, so general directions for use and use-specific directions for use, we added an additional field, risk mitigation measures, containing frequently used sentences in the SPC for product types 1 to 5, 8, and 18. In the current version, phrases are available in English, and translation will be progressively added. Risk mitigation measures not covered by the phrases can be inserted in the free text field as before. Content of both fields will be retrieved to the SPC documents in RTF and PDF format. Some of the phrases contain parameters, so user can select a value from a drop-down menu or add their own text. Now let's take a look at the changes we did in the biocidal product authorization dataset to align it better to the SPC. Section 7, Intended Use and Exposure, has now a similar structure in both working contexts. We changed the way in which the instructions for use are reported. Namely, we added a section 7.9, Proposed Instructions for Use, and instruction for use relevant to the whole meta SPC or to the whole single product should be reported in section 11, Measures to Protect Humans, Animals, and the Environment. In both those documents, in section 7.9 and in section 11, we added an additional field containing frequently used sentences in the SPC and translation. As for the SPC, in the section 7.9, this field is called Use-Specific Risk Mitigation Measures, and in the section 11, this field is called Control Measures of Repellents or Poison included in the product to prevent action against not-target organisms. Alignment between two working contexts allows reuse of existing BPR biocidal product authorization dataset to prepare an SPC. Here are some important messages regarding this reuse. When a user changes a working context from BPR biocidal product authorization to BPR summary of product characteristic SPCs, only documents relevant to the SPC are displayed in the table of contents. Names of the sections are SPC specific. It is important to mention that names of the documents and records keep the names provided in the original dataset, so BPR biocidal product authorization dataset. Those names can be edited in the SPC, having in mind that the new name will appear also in the biocidal product authorization working context if a user decides to change a working context back. In documents used by both working contexts, for example GHS used in the classification and labeling section and in the hazard and precautionary statement section, fields relevant only to BPR biocidal product authorization are hidden but can be displayed if working context is changed again. A composition of a BPR biocidal product authorization dataset can be limited in the SPC dossier and in the SPC RTF and PDF documents to only two active substances, substances of concern, releasers, and other substances, knowledge of which is essential for proper use of biocidal product. It is done by setting up regulatory flags in the BPR biocidal product authorization dataset before it is reused for an SPC. The detailed instruction on how to use the flags is included in the biocidal submission manual, how to prepare a biocide dossier. The manual is referred on this page, and this information is provided in Annex 5. Still on the composition, substances other than an active substance are allowed in an SPC as datasets. So they can remain as in the biocidal product authorization dataset, which documents in the table of contents limited only to identity of the substance. The documents not relevant to the SPC component are hidden, but can be displayed if working context of a product is changed again. RTF PDF SPCs will retrieve a reference substance from a non-active substance dataset. Finally, I would like to mention what should be still adapted manually when existing BPR biocidal product authorization dataset is reused for an SPC. So, mixture component reported in a biocidal product composition needs to be manually adapted, as only substances are allowed in the SPC and not mixtures. So, substances relevant to the SPC contained in a mixture need to be reported as reference substances or substance datasets. Regarding the packaging section, content of the field Additional information on packaging in the biocidal product authorization dataset it is transferred to the field Pack size and packaging material in the SPC. If this field is left empty, information about packaging needs to be provided from scratch in the SPC. And finally, other information is an original document not mapped to BPR biocidal product authorization dataset, so the information can be provided there only in the SPC working context. Additionally, April release includes improvements and fixes on the SPC reports, so on the RTF and PDF documents. The table of contents has been removed. The reference substance name in the active substance is taken from manufacturers of the active substance table. The reference substance name is now displayed for components indicated as substances of concern. The family and product name in the cover page is taken from the family or meta-SPC identifier or product name fields, respectively. The translated name of a reference substance is displayed for the reference substance component if this reference substance has been selected from ECA BPR active substances lists. Regarding fixes, now the ampersand sign and the Maltese version of the SPC are correctly displayed, and composition tables of meta-SPCs and products include all relevant components unless their content or content range is 0. Let me also provide you with some update on where we are with the implementation of Drinking Water Directive format in Euclid. A pre-release of Euclid contains minimum viable product prepared based on development of the legal framework in 2023 and requirements and feedback from experts, for example, from the IT tool user group. The format contains 3 working contexts based on first 2, so notification of intention and application, dossiers can be created and submitted. And the third working context will be used to provide data for relevant chemical species. This working context will be displayed for all the chemical species other than applied for entry, linked in the Drinking Water Directive application. If you are interested in joining the Drinking Water Directive IT user group in testing and discussing Drinking Water Directive Euclid format, please contact us by given email address. This is all from me. Thank you very much for your attention, and I hand over to my colleague Robin Allen.
Thank you, Dorota. Hello, my name is Robin Allen. I work in the Euclid team here at ECHA. I write user documentation for Euclid, and along with the rest of the team, I monitor queries that come in via the help desk. In this webinar, I will be providing some advice on upgrading Euclid, which is derived from those experiences. The slides are divided up into what to consider before, during, and then after the upgrade. Before upgrading, remember that all the data will be converted to the new format. Thereafter, if you import data, it will be converted into the new format no matter what version was used to create it. This goes right back to the start of Euclid 6. This will cause changes to the data, even for dossiers, which are often considered to be read-only. By default, Euclid data will be exported in the new version of Euclid. However, for exceptional use, there is an option to export in the previous format, which will be covered later. We always recommend that you use the latest version of Euclid, but for practical reasons that is not always the case. Therefore, we ensure that upgrades can be done from older versions. Before upgrading, consider how it will affect you and any other users of the instance of Euclid. Consider whether changes to formats affect business processes. If you work with others on Euclid data, what is their upgrade schedule, and how would it affect your exchange of data with them? For the submission of data to authorities, follow their recommendations as to the version of Euclid. Some authorities can accept dossiers in the latest and older versions, whereas others may accept only the latest. An authority may not yet have updated its systems and therefore accepts only the previous format. In that case, you can still upgrade your Euclid, but temporarily use a special option which exports in the previous format. This option is Export to Previous Major Version, as indicated in the screenshot. This feature should be used only where strictly necessary. Be aware that it changes the data present in the exported file relative to that in the Euclid instance. This also occurs for dossiers. Examples are provided on the next two slides. The first example is where a new field has been introduced in Format version 8. The field in question here is Reasons for Classification, which is under the section for Classification and Labelling. On export using Export to Previous Major Version, the data value based on constituents has nowhere to go in Format version 7, so it is placed in a text file and then attached to the Euclid document. Attachments are accessible from the paperclip icon at the top right of the data window, as shown in the screenshot. The text file can be downloaded, opened and edited just like any other text file. The second example refers to the new subheading Endocrine Disruption for the Environment, EUCLP, which has been added in section 2.1 GHS under REACH. It contains new hazard statements, the example here being EUH 430 may cause endocrine disruption in the environment. This statement, as well as any other values of new fields, is placed in a single text file for the Euclid document. Bear in mind that even if the REACH submission succeeds, the data that was moved to a text file will not be disseminated by ECHA. Before upgrading, ensure that a backup exists of both the Euclid application and its database. If an automatic backup procedure is in place, check that it has provided a recent backup from which the Euclid application and its database can be fully recovered. The database can be of two different classes, embedded or external. By default, both the desktop and the server installations of Euclid use an embedded database. This is backed up automatically in the upgrade process. However, for an external database, only the application is backed up, so the database must be backed up according to the instructions of its vendor. The supported types of external database are Derby Network Server, Oracle, and PostgreSQL. Typically, these types of databases are used where the instance of Euclid contains thousands of substances and has tens of concurrent users. In the ECHA cloud services, the Euclid data are backed up as part of the service. Before upgrading, check that the instance of Euclid is working as expected. The upgrade does not require an increase in the system resources, but for comparison with the situation after the upgrade, you can do the following. Note the counts of entities such as substances and mixtures on the dashboard. Check the response times in the interface for typical processes such as opening datasets. If you need to see the version of Euclid, it is stated under About, which is accessible from the main menu as shown in the screenshots. The upgrade process is done by running the Euclid Updater tool, which is available to download free of charge from the Euclid website. It works with all the types of Euclid installation and all its versions for Windows, Linux, and Mac OS. It converts all types of supported database to version 8, whether embedded or external. As stated earlier, the tool backs up the Euclid database for the Euclid desktop and the default server. The tool is self-documenting via its interface, but a full description is provided in the installation and update manual, which is available on the Euclid website. This is a comprehensive reference guide for the server version of Euclid. Install and run the Updater tool in a folder that is outside of the Euclid installation. The tool comes with its own Java and runs independently of Euclid. In Windows, Euclid can be installed without administrative privileges, but always consider access rights and their implications for data security. When the Updater tool has finished, it reports on how the upgrade went. If it reports a success, move on to the next step. If there is an error, look in the tool's logs for reasons and keep them safe for future reference. Next, once you have access to the Euclid interface, clear the browser cache and then restart the browser. Typical shortcuts for fully refreshing a page are Ctrl F5 or Shift F5. From the About window, check that the version of the Euclid application has changed to the new one. Are the counts of substances and mixtures on the dashboard the same? If you have data that are affected by the migration to the new format, check a few examples to see what has happened and look out for new fields. You can also try out any new features that are described in the release notes. In the interface, there is a menu at the top right that contains links to external sources of information and help. For example, there are links to the Euclid Help Desk and to manuals on the ECHA website for entering data into Euclid for the REACH and CLP regulations. Also, delivered with the software, there is a reference manual which describes the functionality of the interface. Look there first if some detail in the interface needs clarification, such as background jobs or entering custom EC numbers into a reference substance. And now to conclude this presentation, let's recap what we have gone through in the webinar overall. The new release is available from the Euclid website. It includes format changes, which are applied automatically during the upgrade. There are some fixes in the software and also some improvements. For a list of these and more details, see the release notes, which are on the Euclid website. During the webinar, we have a question and answer session in Slido, which is open today until 4 o'clock Helsinki time. The code to join the session in Slido is Euclid 2024. You can keep your questions anonymous if you like. The questions and answers will be published on the webinar pages in the near future. Remember that if you need any more information, you can check our website. We also have a channel in YouTube for trainings, and you are welcome to contribute to the Euclid group in LinkedIn. Finally, especially if you have any specific questions about your own use of Euclid, you can get help directly from the experts at ECHA via the Euclid Help Desk. Remember to give as much information as you can about your situation and what you need. Thank you for attending the webinar, and goodbye from the Euclid team.